right, we are live. Okay, so today I'm super excited to dive into this with Kaylee. Thank you for being here. With all of you who are watching the replay later, I'm just going to keep this open just in case. Okay, awesome. So today we are going to dive into really how to stop playing small and how to get out of your own damn way. I am super excited for this topic. This is something I cover in some capacity with all of my clients in some way, shape, or form. There's so many different ways that you might be doing this, some of which usually have like a good, there's good things that can come out of it. There's also negative things that can come out of it. So through this training today, I definitely encourage you guys to take notes and to like find what feels true for where you are and really apply this to how you can take action in a different way, or how you can start to think of different things in the ways that you play small, the ways that we keep ourselves small. I have a candle over here that's lit. I was like, I hope that's not too hot. To really apply this to where this fits in your life and how you're going to really work to change it so you can stop playing small, right? So I'm going to really walk through like the ways that this shows up for so many of us and different examples to kind of help you identify this in your own life, and then really working through like a mindset exercise to stop playing small and to really how to consciously work through this process. So I'm super excited. Let me know if you guys have any questions during this or later. Feel free to email me. I will be sending out the replays to anyone who missed this, or definitely to all of you who are here. So I'm super excited to dive in. So I wanted to start with this myth that you probably saw in some of my posts. This idea of if I just keep my head down and work hard, someone will notice. This was definitely very true for myself and so many of us, especially in the corporate world. When you are hired to do a job and you're doing a great job, you're keeping your head down, you're working, and you're like, if I just keep doing this, if I just work hard enough, if I just keep doing what I'm supposed to, someone will notice, and then I'll get promoted, or then I'll get the raise, or then I'll get this outcome that I'm hoping for. And it's always this idea of hoping, which I dive into with my clients a lot, is, well, I hope they just notice, or I hope I'll get the raise, I hope I'll get the promotion. This idea of just like, if I just do this, then this will happen. And that is just not true, especially in the corporate world, but even in entrepreneurship, even in your family, even in any different situation that you might be in, where you're sitting there hoping something will happen. The majority of the time, it's just not going to happen the way that we wish it would. People are you see this very clearly in social media, but you see this everywhere, that you are the most worried about yourself and what's going on in your reality and your perception, right? Same with everyone else. Doesn't mean that they're going to notice you in whatever capacity you're hoping them to notice you in. Sometimes this happens in the corporate world where like you do get the raise, or you do get like, maybe you are next in line for a promotion. But 9 times out of 10, if you do not speak up, if you do not stop playing small and make yourself notice, make it known in some way, shape, or form that you want this thing to happen, promotion, raise, someone to notice you, someone to ask you out on a date, like whatever this is, if you're just sitting there hoping, it's probably not going to happen. And then you're still left really feeling really frustrated or disappointed, or, what did I do wrong? Why not me? We can really get stuck in this. So this is why today it's all about mindset, is because all of these things are generated by thoughts in our head, either before the fact, before whatever we're hoping to happen happens or doesn't happen, or afterward, what you're left with, which is usually that disappointment, frustration, those questions, which you can really spiral down really quickly in your mindset about why not you, right? So I really want to start with that myth of, if I just keep my head down and work hard, someone will notice, because they're probably worried about their own raise, promotion, or person they want to date, or entrepreneurship, or, you know, their business getting noticed in the media, whatever it is, they are focused on themselves, which is not wrong. It's just how we typically act. You are only in charge of your own reality of what happens. You are responsible for your own results, right? Which means you need to actually ask for what you want. You need to make it known for what you want instead of just playing it small and hoping. So with that, I want to dive into a few reasons to kind of start this off for why you need to stop playing small right now. So a couple reminders, and I want you to apply this to where you're at, or how you can see yourself in these in your life. You are worthy of taking up space. You, as your own individual human being, you have your own purpose in the world to take up space and make things happen. You are good enough right now, just as you are, especially for those of us who really struggle with that idea of not feeling good enough or needing to have all of the things like more in order to be good enough. This is definitely my call to you right now. I know I have definitely found myself in that thought a lot. Is something that I continue to work through. Is if you have ever felt like you're not good enough yet, whatever that means, just know that you are good enough right now with the resources you have. You're doing the best that you can right now, just as you are. You have a voice and you have a message that somebody else needs to hear. Whether that's in a business capacity and you are spreading a message with the world in what you do and the services or products that you offer, maybe that is in the corporate world, and, you know, being the leader, being in that role that you are, you have a message to share, you have a voice. Maybe that's in some political or like activist way, however you apply that, you have your own voice and you have a message to share. You do have skills and innate gifts that only you have, which I love. I work with my clients all the time to really identify themselves, and using so many different tools to understand themselves so much better, so that you can get to know yourself so deeply, to know what those skills and those gifts are and how to really use those in a way that serves you and serves other people and feels really good, instead of just comparing yourself, which is so much easier to do with other people around you. When you can like compare and say like, oh, I have that, or I don't have that, and I want that, and we can get stuck in that. You have these skills, you have these innate gifts that only you have, and again, someone else needs exactly what you have. And then I kind of mentioned this before, but you need to ask for what you want in order to get it. It's very simply stated, but so often we just don't ask for what we want. This can be with our friends and family. This can be with our spouse or significant other. This can definitely be in a work or business capacity. If you are sitting there hoping that something will happen, don't just hope. I definitely push you and encourage you to ask for what it is that you want. And if there's a lot of stuff or uncomfortableness that comes up when I say that, that's okay. That's what this training, this masterclass is all about, because I'm really going to walk you through that process of like diving into what that feels like, so that you can take a different action, to shift your perspective, to see it differently, so that you can take a different action. So let's dive into some of the ways that we tend to keep ourselves small. So again, find yourself in these different actions that you might do, and really understand as we get into the exercise, like why you do it or what purpose it's really serving, and then how you want to change it, right? So first of all, this is very big I see this mostly in women. We tend to apologize or say sorry out of habit, especially when there's no reason to apologize. I definitely saw this in the corporate setting so much, where like you would like walk into a room, maybe you walked in late, or you needed to tell your boss something, and it was just that like reaction of like, oh, sorry, but like I kind of have something to say, you know, where you're very like timid, or like, oh, I'm sorry, like, right, like you have nothing to apologize for, but it's really that like reactionary, apology that you are saying like, I'm sorry, or, you know, please forgive me, or I'm disrupting, I'm doing something that I probably shouldn't be. It's this way of kind of like allowing yourself to do the thing, but to keep yourself small in the process. So I definitely encourage you to watch for this, because like I said, this is more common in women than it is in men. But if you watch how people, like if they come into a meeting late, if they need to say something when somebody else is talking, if they need to disrupt in some way for whatever reason, their reaction might be to apologize first. And this is a way that we can like hold ourselves back, keep us small, don't want to like cause that disruption. So if that's you, that's okay. This is very common. I know I've definitely done this too. That is one way. Another way is really just blending in, not calling any attention to yourself. Something I want to say about this one is this is a very learned behavior. If you have a tendency to want to like blend in, whether that's just like blend into the crowd, maybe it's like blend into the wall sometimes, and you don't want to call attention to yourself, maybe you don't want people to call you out on something or call on you to answer something. You probably saw this in school, in a work setting, in a crowd situation, like you probably just blended in. You didn't want to call attention to yourself. You probably did this in some way, shape, or form of how you like dressed or how you presented yourself, how you were visible, or in this case, not visible to others around you. This was probably a learned behavior caused by an experience that you had. Maybe it was how, like what your parents would tell you, right? If you're like, oh, don't cause a scene, or like you're embarrassing me or something like that. Like if somebody had told you things when you were growing up, especially, or you had a situation, an experience that caused you to learn that you needed to not call attention to yourself, this was probably like, you're probably continuing to do this because that had happened. So in that way, especially because it is a learned behavior, it's really like by doing this, it's keeping you, your brain thinks that it's keeping you safe because of that experience you had with whoever it was, with whatever happened. Fill in the blanks if you can identify with this one. It was blending in or not causing attention to yourself was really keeping you safe. It taught you how to keep yourself safe in that type of situation, right? So the beauty about this one is this is something that might be hard to shift, but it's definitely like, because it was a learned behavior, you can choose to shift it. And it might feel uncomfortable at first, but you can definitely do it. You can relearn how you want to respond to this instead of just this response out of safety because of this experience that happened. Not speaking up when you have something to say, especially if you're afraid of offending someone else, or you're afraid of imposter syndrome that might come up. Maybe it's that like not good enough feeling. Basically, maybe that thought that's coming up, and we're going to dive more into this, is like, who am I to be talking about this? Or who am I to be sharing about this? Why do I have something to say? Or like, who's going to listen to me? Why am I important to say something? Whatever is coming up for you, this is the part we're going to dive into more. But if you have something to say and you're just simply not speaking up, again, in any capacity, if this is like a work setting and you have an idea or something to say, if this is not speaking up with a significant other who has like hurt you or who did something that you didn't like, maybe this is in your family, right? And you're just choosing not to speak up for whatever reason, but really pay attention to that reason. And like I said, we're going to get into that more in the exercise. So like, we'll come back to this, but that reason is the biggest part. And again, this is probably, if you're not speaking up, that reason will have a lot to do with it, but that reason could potentially be another learned behavior. Maybe it was because somebody had told you like that they were offended, or your parents had said something to really like feel like you couldn't speak up, or that you had to just be quiet or blend in, right? Kind of going back to that one. Let's talk about this one. This is one of my favorite ones. especially because I have definitely identified with this so much in the past, is this idea of people pleasing, right? Being a yes person, pleasing other people, feeling the need to like say yes or to make others happy. This is very, very common. Again, I see this more in women than in men, but typically, and this kind of goes into the next one, but typically it's because of we are more emotional, right? Like we're an emotional being. We usually act on things, typically, purchasing behaviors, different decisions that we make, it's usually from an emotional decision instead of more of a logical based, right? Which is typically more male, or like a male, more masculine energy to decide on things, instead of this feminine energy of like feeling into it or having that emotional response to something. Since we have that, these two things, so I'm going to go probably into these things in tandem. This idea of people pleasing happens, or the need to feel like you're caretaking others, which is very typical for women, right? Because we're usually the caretakers, or you're like the mother figure, right? Whether that's true when you're actually a parent, or it's just something you typically do based on your, you know, your energy, that need to, or feeling like you have a need to take care of others, or putting others before yourself. This is, again, both of these, people pleasing and caretaking, they can be really good things, right? Like it's not all bad. It can have this good energy about it of like, it means well, your intentions are well, to put somebody before yourself, to take care of them, to want to make them happy, right? To want to please them in some way, to make them want to feel cared for or happy, you know, having them pleased in some sort of way. That can be really good, right? That can be a really good gesture and intention. The way that it starts to become an issue is when you put that too far high up on like this hierarchy for yourself, like on the totem pole, to put it before your needs and what you want. So if you're doing this and your intention from it is not just to like make the other person happy, like that's a good intention, right? Like if you just want the other person to feel really good, great, that's probably good. But if you're doing it because you're worried if you say no, then it might cause an issue. It might disrupt them. They may not like you because of that. And same thing with caretaking. If you feel more obligated to do it instead of feeling like you want to do it, if you're trying to make other people feel comfortable, even though it makes you feel really uncomfortable, if you're wanting to say, or if you say yes to like, say, going to a party or something, but you feel like you really, really want to say no, or you really don't want to be there, that's where you start to play small and get in your own way, because you're not being true to you. You're doing it in despite of like feeling obligated or feeling like you need to, instead of feeling like you want to. I have to sneeze. Okay. I hate that. I hate when it disappears. Anyway, so that's where there's like this fine line between like people pleasing and caretaking being a good thing, and where it can go wrong, where it can be really harmful to your own, just your own energy. Because as you do that, if you're doing it out of a sense of feeling obligated to do so, or doing it because you don't want to hurt the other person's feelings, or you're worried about how they're going to respond, and you do something that's different than what you actually want, then that's where you start to feel like resentment, or these other like negative feelings of like, I'm just going to do this because I feel like I have to, but I don't want to. And I know that I don't want to. You start feeling resentment. You definitely don't go to those things or do those things with a good energy. And I mean, it's not going to, at that point, it's not going to help the other person anymore either, because they're probably going to feel some of that energy, especially the more and more you do that, the more they're going to understand like, okay, cool, you came to the party, but like you really don't look like you want to be here, right? Like that's just because you're doing it because you think it will please them. Usually it will have that other effect on it too, of like, even though that's why you did it, they're still feeling that you don't want to. So it's really not doing you any good. This is the other part of this is, oh my gosh, if this is something that you've done for so long, either the caretaking or the people pleasing, it can be really hard to change your behaviors out of this, because it's just such a learned response of like, I need to say yes to this, or I feel like I need to take care of this other person or make them feel good before myself. How do I do this differently? And again, some of this is what we're going to get into in the exercise. So really being conscious about what happens in your mind as you're going through this process, and then really figuring out the exact point of where to change it, where to start making those changes for yourself in your response. Part of this is first deciding on like why you know that you need to say no to these things, and then how to do it, right? Sometimes that's the hardest part, is learning how to choose a different response and really how to do that, especially in a way that feels good. I could definitely go on a tangent just in people pleasing in general, because that's something that a lot of my clients really need. And I know I have needed in the past too, of how do I say no to someone, especially after you're so used to just saying yes. So I get it. Definitely let me know if you have any questions as we go through the exercise. I feel like that in itself could be its own training. But for the time being, I hope that this exercise really does help you think through this consciously and start to figure out how you can change that, some of the how for that. And then last but not least, just the fear of feeling like you're going to disrupt something or someone, and the fear of like being visible. What would it mean to you if you were visible, if people saw you, if people heard you? What would it mean to you if you disrupted either another person, or if you disrupted something that was, said, or an idea, or something that was already in action? Like, what does that mean to you if you were to do that? And usually that's the piece that we're afraid of, right? That's why we avoid it. That's why we don't do the things. That's why we keep ourselves small, because of what that would mean, right? And usually, especially with the people pleasing, caretaking, just not, apologizing for yourself, not speaking up if you have something to say, usually you're worried about what could happen, which not all the times does. But that's usually the part that we stay small for, because we're afraid of what might happen. We're afraid of what other people might think if we do this instead, because we don't know, right? Because usually we're either worried about what's going to happen because we don't know, because we've chosen to keep ourselves small and chosen this behavior instead of something else. Or like I was talking about before, especially if it's a learned behavior, you probably had some instance where it did go really wrong. And then you learned from that not to do that, because it meant you having to feel that uncomfortableness again, being really like, maybe you were called out, maybe you felt embarrassed, maybe, someone really like dug into you about what you had said or what you did that made you feel really terrible, right? That in response, you learn not to do that in order to stay safe, right? So that didn't happen again, which is very, very normal. Doesn't mean that it's always going to. You probably had a situation that happened like that. And then our brain just generalizes anything close to that, this could happen. And that feels really scary. So it's our brain's job to keep us safe, right? So that's why we apologize, or we just blend into the wall. We stay small so we don't have to feel that again. Doesn't mean it's always going to happen, but that's how our brain keeps us safe. So instead, going back to what we talked about before about like why it's important for you not to play small, you probably have big things you want to do. You probably have a message that you need to share. You probably have a business or an idea or something that you want to get off the ground, and really like not just blend into the wall, but like make it seen, make it heard. You probably want to get visible. You probably in some way want to stop playing small, get this thing out there, get your voice out there, and have it be seen, heard, and understood, which is really what we all want at the end of the day. And all of these things that you're doing is holding you back from that. So this is how we get in our own way, especially subconsciously. You've probably been people pleasing or apologizing or doing all these things very subconsciously because you've just kept doing them over and over. It's just like driving a car, right? Like at some point, you don't really have to think about all of the steps. You just get in the car and go because muscle memory, right? Like your brain just remembers how to do things. Same thing with these responses. As if you're used to apologizing, if you're used to just saying yes to things or caretaking others first, or just blending in the wall, you probably don't know how to do that differently unless you decide to consciously change that. So let's start to dive in to how to stop playing small and how to get out of your own damn way. Really walking you through these conscious things to work through so that you can change your response, so that you can stop playing small and start actually breaking free from really how to get out of your own way, how to get seen and heard, and start playing at a bigger level. So I definitely encourage you to grab a notebook, jot these things down, really work through this as we go. You guys will all get the replay after. So I hope that you go through this with all different, any way that that you feel like you're getting in your own way or that you're playing small. I hope you go back and use this every time to keep working through this, so that you can choose something different. So take a sip of coffee. Okay. I love it. Okay, so number one, I really want you to think about when you start to play small. So in one of those ways that we had talked about, the ways that you're keeping yourself small, use one of these for the first time you go through this. Just use one. If you apologize, if you people please, if you caretake, if you're not speaking up, like really whatever it is, use one of these. And I want you to think through a really specific time that you did this. So when you think of that behavior of playing small, can you think of a very specific time when you did this? And I want you to think about this and play this event in your head. What happened? How did this feel? What went wrong? Like, what was your response? Really just like you were watching it in a movie, like play this event in your head. I want you to, whichever action that you did, I want you to fill in the blank. I'm just going to use like apologizing for this example, right? So ask yourself these questions. What made you feel like you wanted to apologize in that instant? What made you feel like you wanted to people please or say yes, to take care of others, right? Like fill in that blank for yourself. What made you feel like you wanted to do this? Was it something that was said? Was it something you heard that made you want to apologize? Was it something you saw that made you want to apologize? Was it something you felt that made you want to apologize or people please or caretake or whatever the thing is? Really notice what that thing was that made you want to have that as a response. Because in this situation, this is where you identify what that trigger was, so that we can really, that's the piece that you want to change, right? That's at that trigger, you need to decide to change your response to that trigger, right? But you need to know what that trigger is first. So really think through, like, was it something that you saw? Was it something that you heard? Was it something you felt? And that caused you to want to apologize or want to say yes, right? Really play that through and think through. What was that moment that really caused you to feel the need to apologize or play small or people please or whatever that thing is for you? So first one, thinking through that trigger. What is your trigger for that instance? And this may take some time. So definitely take some time with number one as you need, especially if you're watching the replay. Feel free to pause this, think through it, play this in your head a few times, and really think of like what it was that was that trigger for you to have that response? You might also think of, like, if you can think of another specific time where this happened, think how the two are similar and like what happened in each that was the thing that made you react or respond the way that you did, right? So maybe it was like, maybe it was a question or something that somebody said that caused you to do that. Maybe it was something that you saw. So maybe, I know, like, for me, I can read people's emotions very well. So like if I see them like tense up or kind of have a reaction, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. You know, like that's kind of the trigger for me. If you can see someone have some type of emotional response or physiological response to like what you did or what you said, that usually triggers something. If it's just the way that you felt, like maybe you felt kind of this uneasy feeling or this awkwardness, maybe some anxiety come up, what was it that triggered you to do that? Okay, number 2, I want you to recognize the thought pattern here. So when this trigger happened, so just like we worked through number 1, when this happened, what exactly came up for you? What was the conversation in your head at that point, right? If you saw somebody's like visceral reaction to what you had said or what you did, it was probably like, oh shit, like they didn't like that, or something happened, like I should play small, or I should apologize, or like what is literally, if you could, this happens very quickly, right? Like this is almost all unconscious, like it just happens because we're just so used to it. And like I've said before, like it's a learned reaction. So when you learn that and you do it over and over and over, just like driving a car, you don't have to think about it anymore. So when you're thinking about that very specific situation, I want you to almost like slow it down and think about like what happened. What was the conversation in your mind? What were some of those thoughts that came up for you? Was it like, oh, I don't feel good enough, or oh, they're not going to like me if I don't say yes, like if I say no, they're not going to like me? Is it like feeling obligated to do something to make the other person feel comfortable? Like what exactly is happening in your head when that thing comes up, when that thing triggers you? And really be conscious of like, what is that thought? What is the uncomfortableness that comes up for you? What does it mean? What was the intention behind the action? So the action that you took, usually that like learned response, to apologize, to say yes to someone when maybe you didn't want to like stay quiet when maybe even though you had something to say. When that response happened, what was the intention? What was your intention? If I do this, if I respond in this way, it'll be okay. Or like, I'll be safe because they'll like it, right? Like it'll make them happy if I do this. It will make them feel comfortable if I do this. If, let's see here, if I blend in, if I don't call attention to myself, then it will do X, Y, and Z, right? Like what was that? If you could like really think through, and you probably didn't have these thoughts, but if you can think through it now, like what was the thing that you were avoiding? What was the intention behind your action, right? Let's see here. Were you reacting out of fear? Were you reacting out of worry? Were you reacting out of trying to please someone, being a people pleaser? In what way, how was this, the way that you decided to respond or react, how is that keeping you safe? And I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here. But so number 3, so let me walk backwards because I want you guys to have all these steps. So number 1, think through that trigger. Like what was the trigger to make you respond or react? Then recognize the thought at that trigger, right? Like why did you, or what happened when you responded that way or when that trigger happened, right? Like what was the thought pattern there? Number 3 is understanding why or when this was created. So can you think back to your experience and remember if you think back through some childhood situations, right? So you probably had a specific experience. Maybe this was the first one. Maybe this is just more of a relevant one that happened like last week or something that wasn't too far away where you saw this happen. If you can think back through all of your experiences, especially with this thing, and remember like the first time that you remember feeling like you needed to apologize, or like you needed to people please, or you needed to stay small, you needed to blend in, whatever that thing is for you. Can you remember like the first time that you felt like you needed to do this, or that first experience where you learned that you should respond in this way? And what exactly happened during that experience, that situation? Was it a parent? Was it a friend? Was it a complete stranger? Was it just you? Like, what happened in that event that you can first remember? And what were you trying to avoid? What were you trying to do, or what were you trying to avoid by acting or responding the way that you did? So going back to the question I was like getting ahead of myself with, how is this response or reaction to this trigger keeping you safe? How is it a way of keeping you safe? What was it protecting you from? This one's really important because this is where you can decide to see things differently. It was probably, especially if this was a learned behavior from some event or experience that happened, it probably did have a very intentional purpose of keeping you safe, right? Like if it really if it was the most embarrassing moment of your life, or like if someone like really like called you out on this and it felt terrible, or like you felt super anxious and like, something where you felt these really like not so great feelings, this new response reaction to it was a way of like keeping you safe so that you could avoid feeling like that again, right? And that can be really good, but at some point you outgrow that, or you can see how it once kept you safe. It once like helped you avoid feeling that way, but now you get to choose something different and know that it's okay, right? Or now like maybe it's not so embarrassing, or it's not so bad because it's actually the thing that helps you get the thing that you want, right? So like take like public speaking, for instance. This is a big one that I know a lot of people have is you probably had, I'm going to make something up, but maybe you had like an event that happened in elementary school or something where somebody called on you, or you had to stand up and like give a speech or talk in front of people, and people laughed at you, right? Like your classmates laughed at you for whatever reason, or something happened that made you feel terrible, made you feel embarrassed, and made you really fear public speaking, right? It was a way to keep you safe then. So like if you weren't in that situation, if you weren't put in a place of public speaking again, then you could stay safe and you wouldn't have to have people laugh at you, or you wouldn't have to have those feelings that were generated from whatever happened in that moment, right? Now, as you grew up, maybe you have, maybe you have a job, maybe you have a business, maybe you have an instance where you do have a message to share. You really want to speak and tell people, like spread your message. You want to help people with your product, your service, with the speech that you have prepared, like whatever it is, right? And that's actually helping you get to the thing that you want, right? If you share your message with people, whether it's virtually on the internet, maybe it's in person, maybe it's in a big arena and you're doing like a motivational speech, maybe you're just standing up and talking about your product or pitching it to someone, that in some way, shape, or form is public speaking. Like you have to do that in order to grow the business or to get promoted or whatever your end result is there. You're now needing to do that. Understanding when this fear, like when this response was created, you can see how it was keeping you safe before, but no longer, like now it's just holding you back from what you want. And you can decide to like let go of like pretty much like, thank you for keeping me safe, but I no longer need this, right? And you can release that, you can let that go and have that mean something new now, right? You can have it mean that public speaking actually is going to help you get to your goals, or it's actually going to, it's not going to keep you safe, but it's actually going to hold you back from what you want, right? You can assign it a new meaning and decide something differently. So that's why this part's important, is like really understanding how and why it was keeping you safe and what purpose that served. And then understanding how can you look at it differently through a new lens or a new perspective on how it's actually holding you back now and stopping you from achieving what you want instead of just keeping you safe. Because if you just believe that it's keeping you safe, still, you're not going to be able to let that thing go, and you're not going to change this response or reaction, right? If it's still keeping you safe, it's still serving a purpose, you're still going to respond in the same way that you have been, because why change it, right? So this is the piece where understanding why and when it was created, where you get to then shift it, which is the next step, to decide something different, right? So number 4, deciding how this no longer serves you. Through this past experience, understand that this was a reaction or a response and a belief in your mind that was created to help keep you safe, right? So really understanding why that was formed, how it was keeping you safe, how you could avoid however you didn't want to feel, right? How it was keeping you safe. Knowing that it served a great purpose then, right? However, this belief or behavior no longer serves you. So how does it no longer serve you? How is it keeping you small? How is it stopping you from achieving the thing that you want? How is it holding you back? Really making that like connection and then like disconnecting it from that and assigning it a new purpose so that you can work to change it. This is like doing this super, super consciously. There's other tools that I use like NLP to help you do this at more of an unconscious level, which is really interesting to use and work through like in a different capacity. So yes, like there's definitely other tools to do this, but when you're able to do this, you can think through it more consciously. So then when it comes up the next time, like you actually feel like you have a choice or you get to decide something different. And it doesn't have to be that scary. It's not just you like going into this, walking into a room and like immediately just like not apologizing for being there, or deciding one day that you're going to play big instead of play small, right? You're really understanding like why that was even there to begin with, and how you can break this down, how you can consciously shift it so that you can choose something different and like allow it to feel okay, allow you to actually do it. So going back to that, so really deciding how it no longer serves you, knowing that it served a purpose then and it doesn't anymore. So how is this preventing you from achieving what you want today? Really make that new connection or like assign it that new purpose so that you can like really separate how it used to serve you and how by changing this can serve you today in a new way. Okay. Then it's all about like, once you do that, once you have this new perspective on how you're letting it be something different, and it's no longer, that's no longer keeping you safe, or that no longer serves a purpose. Now you get to choose how you react or respond differently, right? So going back to like whatever the thing is that you're doing, if you're apologizing, how are you going to not apologize for walking into a room or for interrupting someone or for whatever that is, and let it feel and be okay when you don't apologize, right? Same with people pleasing. How can you do it in a way that feels, how can you say no to something in a way that feels really good, knowing that this is actually helping you and it's not hurting anyone else by saying no? How can you do that and feel good about how you're doing that? Same with any of these. Speaking up, right? How can you really challenge yourself to like speak up and not just like hold something back if you have something to say, and letting that feel and be okay when you do it, right? Knowing that this new purpose that this serves, to play big, to not play small anymore, this is going to help you feel okay in doing that next thing. So with that, as you're going through and as you're doing this new thing and you're deciding how to respond or react differently to this, number 6, and this, I want this one to sink in for sure. This is the last step. So much permission here to let it feel uncomfortable and let it be messy. Because the first time you do this, it's probably not going to feel great. It's still going to be scary, but because your brain is still very much like it's going to want to respond how you always have, right? In that learned behavior, in how you've that unconscious response of like how you used to respond. It's going to feel uncomfortable to change that. It's really going to feel uncomfortable to say no to something the first time that you do it, right? And to let it be messy. Like, this is part of creating any new habit, is like, it is going to be messy. Start super small, right? Really start small and build your way up. So if it's like this big thing that you like need to say no to, and you're like, oh, maybe I can't, but like in some small way, how can you say no to this? Like, how can you, it's like one puzzle piece at a time, right? Like literally one step at a time. How can you start really small and start to change this and let it feel okay? Continue to build on this new habit so that it feels better and better every time, and really give yourself so much permission and grace that like, this is going to feel uncomfortable. This is going to be a messy process. It's not going to look great every single time. It's not going to feel great every single time. But with practice, as you do it, this is going to get better and better, just like anything else you do with practice, right? So really let it feel uncomfortable, let it be messy, but continue to challenge yourself to do it. So a couple examples for you for this. If you are a people pleaser, if you need to figure out a new way how to say no, one of my favorite things that I learned, especially, and you can probably use this with any of these, one of the best ways to start to change this behavior is, things are going to come up in, say, like a conversation, right? Like, hey, do you want to go to this party? Or do you want to do this thing? Or can you do this? Can you do X, Y, and Z? If your initial response is to say yes, because you're a people pleaser, very much like me, one of the best things that you can do to start building this new habit, instead of just saying yes, buy yourself some time. Because you don't expect yourself to just say like no right away and like let it feel good, right? Don't expect yourself to like do the opposite of how you've responded over and over, but instead, how can you really like take a step back, like buy yourself some time to give yourself time for this to process and to decide how you're going to respond to this in a different way instead of just doing it. So by that, usually if somebody says like, hey, do you want to go to this thing, or can you do this? One of the first things I say is like, cool, like, thanks for asking. Let me check my calendar. Let me check with my partner. Let me do this first and I'll get back to you. Whatever that thing is, this helps buy you some time so that you can really like work through this process and decide what you're going to say, what feels good. Sometimes it is a yes, and that's great, but is it for the right intention? If it's a no, if you're like, I really don't want to go to that thing, great. Like, you already know that it's a no, but how are you going to say no? And how are you going to say no in a way that feels good, where you don't feel like you have to explain yourself or you have to justify why you're saying no? How are you going to do that? So by doing this is like taking that step back and saying, how can I buy myself some time to really like formulate this new answer or like this new response so that I can do it from a place that feels really good? That's one of the best things that's helped me, is like, great, let me check my calendar. Let me get back to you. Especially like, that's just one of the easiest ones. Thank you. Let me get back to you, and I'll let you know whenever they need to know. Usually people do not need to know right away. Even if it's like an hour, maybe it's 15 minutes, maybe it's 5 days from now, like whatever that is, buy yourself a little bit of time so that you can formulate what you're going to say instead of just this reactionary response that you're so used to. So same thing for like caretaking others, right? If you are in some sort of situation where you want to, like, your initial response is to caretake somebody else and like have them feel comfortable before you put like whatever you want, before you worry about that. In this situation, like, how can you buy yourself some time or take that step back to really assess, like, okay, what do I actually want here? And how can I either do it in a way that benefits both of us? Or how can I be okay if like what I want maybe isn't going to caretake the other person? Maybe it's not going to help them feel happy or comfortable or whatever it is. Like maybe it's something I do actually need to do for myself, and like let it be okay to not make other people feel comfortable first, right? So buy yourself some time to really formulate how you're going to respond to this and like justify it in your head so that you can feel really good then taking action and doing it. If this is like blending in or like not calling attention to yourself, and that's usually your response, how can you like look in a different light? How can you know your end outcome that you want to achieve, and how playing bigger, like not just being a wallflower or blending in with the crowd, like how actually standing out, speaking up can actually help you. And then being able to recognize when that comes up, right? Is it in a meeting at work when you know that you really need to like prepare yourself for the meeting so that you can stand behind what you're going to say and you're going to tell them your idea? Or how can you recognize different situations, different opportunities for you to speak up, to stand out, to do something different than how you might respond, and then really like be open and know where those might come up and then decide how you're going to respond. One way for me, especially for like blending out, is networking. That has never been like a thing that's come very naturally to me. So anytime I go to like a networking event or a group event with a lot of people, I know that I have to like give myself a pep talk in my car to like really prepare for like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Here's how it's going to help me. This is how I can see like how it's actually going to get me the thing I want, instead of like hoping for the best, right? And here's how I'm going to like actively put myself out there to like meet with 5 different people, and like this is what I'm going to talk to them about. This is how I'm going to like, this is how I'm going to do this. If you need to prep yourself for that, that is okay, right? And then it's like recognizing, oh, this is a situation I need to do this in. Great. I'm going to do it because of these reasons, because I know the outcome that I'm working for, and I'm not just going to sit here hoping that somebody notices me and will listen to me, right? Like you have to prepare yourself for that, which especially is like all of the introverts in here for sure. That can be really, really hard. Yeah. So I love it. Even as extroverts too, like you may have had, if you are very extroverted, you may have had some instance where like you were called out for being too extroverted or too in your face, or like, too much, right? I hear this a lot from extroverts, where it's like people will like, oh, you're too much, like you're, too much energy, too much to handle type thing. And you may have learned to like hold yourself back, or to not speak up, or to not do things because of that. So how can you do it in a balanced way? Like how can you really decide how you want to act instead? And then recognize those opportunities as they come up. And then, like I said, like really let it be uncomfortable, let it be messy. The first times you do it, it's going to get easier and easier as you go. Okay, so many good things. I hope that was really helped you walk through each of these things. Like I said, for everyone that comes up for you and how you keep yourself small, work through this individually with each one, because they probably have their own different intentions or different ways that they're keeping you safe, so that you can really break those down to decide how you want to react or respond instead, and how that's actually helping you achieve the thing that you really want. So let me know what questions you guys have. I would love to know how this worked for you. Definitely feel free to reach out to me afterward. Something I did want to offer for you guys who are here, who have registered, is I want to offer you a free 30-minute breakthrough session. So with any of these like limiting beliefs or ways that you play small as you're working through this, or if you're feeling really stuck in this, I want to help coach you on how to change this, both consciously, and we can dive into some of the unconscious parts as well, so that you can really start taking up space and just go after the things that you want, so that you can actually achieve the success or results, the things that you want, and stop playing small. So if that is something you're interested in, I am going to send you an email with this replay so that you have it, and a link to book your session. So feel free to do that. If you guys have any other questions, please let me know. Thank you for being here. I hope that this was super helpful. And yeah, I will talk to you guys soon.